The opinions and views expressed on this program do not reflect those of the management or staff of Community Media of Staten Island. The Get Together is brought to you in cooperation with the Older Adult Center Networks and the Center for Lifelong Development, with funding provided by the New York City Department of Aging, and produced through the facilities of Community Media of Staten Island.
Hi, this is Reuben Warren from The Get Together, and next to me I have Marc Gold. We recently had an opportunity to sit down with Marc and to interview him about his family, the family legacy, and we also threw in some baseball history. And if you're wondering what these bobbleheads are doing in front of us, Marc, why are they in front of us?
Well, you're right. Why would we be sitting here and we're going to talk about Gold's horseradish and the Mets? Would there be bobblehead dolls? Well, there's a fascinating story about the curse of the bobblehead. And briefly, any person, any player that we made a bobblehead doll, it was our choice to select who would be the bobblehead for 13 consecutive years. That particular player, he turned into a latke.
All right, well, hold that thought, Marc, and let's sit back and watch the interview. And at the end, Marc's going to elaborate a little bit more on the bobbleheads and some other interesting tidbits. So stay tuned. Hi, folks. I'm Reuben Warren, here with Joe Pratty and Dave Frankel, welcoming you to another edition of The Get Together, where we discuss various topics just like you would do when you get together with your friends. Our guest today is Marc Gold. If mentioning golds makes your saliva glands spring into action, it's because of the horseradish you just swallowed. But I'm getting a little ahead of the story. Marc, welcome to The Get Together. You've got an interesting story to tell that combines food, family, and sports. So let's start at the beginning and tell us a little about your family history.
Reuben, thank you for that very nice intro. And Joe, it's nice to be with you. David, very nice to meet you. I know you have an incredible Mets background, which you're going to talk about later.
Yes.
For Reuben. Right now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Gold's horseradish, which I am the third generation of Gold's horseradish. And the company actually started in 1932 by my grandparents. And my grandfather was a radio repairman, a radio technician, and he also sold life insurance for New York Life. This goes back to the early 30s, like 1931, going into 32. My grandfather, that's Hyman Gold, he would pay the premiums for his, or the monthly premiums for his customers that couldn't afford it. New York Life didn't like that, so they fired him. And at that time, depths of depression, he had three children, including my father, Morris Gold, and his two brothers, Manny and Herb Gold. My father was born in 1919, so this is 1932, 12 years old, 13 years old, and he was the oldest. The three small kids that they had to take care of. Meantime, a cousin of my grandfather was grinding horseradish. This is what a horseradish root looks like, as we all know. And that's what the finished product. It wasn't in color in 1932, but that's what horseradish was. And this cousin of my grandfather, he had a spot on the street. If you could picture it, this is the bustling Brownsville street. And the cousin of my grandfather had a grinder, a little horseradish grinder, that he would, on the street, he would rent a spot on the street from the landlord, who was the store owner, right behind this whole mess of a group of people. He would rent that spot, and he would grind horseradish for passers-by. He got into a fight with the landlord, that is the owner of the store who was renting him the spot on the street, and this is the cousin of my grandfather, got into fisticuffs. The cousin was thrown into jail, horseradish grinder and all, thrown into the sin bin. My grandfather bailed him out. The cousin didn't want to know from the grinder anymore. But my grandmother said, what can we do with this? We need extra money. every penny counts. Every penny is important at this time in 1932. She took the horseradish grinder. They brought it up the steps to their apartment at 832 Coney Island Avenue. Any of you Brooklynites here know Coney Island Avenue. It's the foot of Dorchester Road. If you could picture that exact spot, that's where Gold started, the apartment where my grandparents lived. And she would grind the horseradish, spoon it into bottles, because the cousin had left a bunch of bottles and a bunch of caps also.
So they took over the whole thing,
They
the
took-
supplies, the grinder.
That was the grinder, some bottles, and some caps. And she would spoon it into the cap, spoon it into the jar, cap it. She had a funnel, and she would had if you could picture the funnel over the bottle. It wasn't quite. It was a 43 millimeter opening, and the funnel would go. And with the if you could picture a funnel, she would put the horseradish in, and she would go whap, and the horseradish, she knew exactly how to fill up that bottle to get it to the top, cap it, and my grandfather would sell it on the street. So he would. I once talked about this story, and I referred to my grandfather as a peddler, and my father said, "Your grandfather was not a peddler; he was a businessman. He would not sell it to people on the streets. He would go to stores." In the area, in the Brownsville area, Borough Park area.
So they didn't go back onto the street to sell in front of the
No,
the
he
shop,
did not
the
do
store.
that. He went to stores and he would sell 2 or 3 bottles at a time to the store. And he'd say, "I'll come back, bring you 2 or 3 bottles next week or 2 weeks, and this way you'll keep it fresh." And it's important. My father always taught us that, which lasts right to this day. You have to keep the horseradish fresh. You have to keep it refrigerated, and you have to keep it fresh. Even when we making horseradish now, well, we sold a company in 2015, but right up until that point, it was so important to look at the date. And the date we would put on it would be, we'd have a 6-month out date, which we reduced to 4 months because horseradish doesn't last for 6 months. Our horseradish there was no preservatives, it was horseradish, vinegar, and salt, and then we'd for red, we just add beets to it. And my grandfather would sell it to the stores and come back, and that's how we started. That's how Gold started. Now, my father and his 2 brothers, as they got older, they would put it on satchels on their bicycle, and they would put a few bottles in whatever to fill up the satchels, and they would now sell it, make deliveries. My grandfather would take orders, and my father and his brothers would make the deliveries, and that's how we started. So one time, my father told me a story, how he went with my grandfather to Astoria. My grandfather had a route in Astoria that he had developed something called wine brick, which is a whole other story. Wine brick was a legal way of selling wine during the Depression because it was a brick that had a certain substance in it. When you added liquid to it, it would turn into wine. And what's funny about wine brick is that the instructions on wine brick said you must not do this, you must not do this, because that would mean it would turning into wine. But people weren't dumb. And they thought, I'm going to do that. And they turned it into wine. But he was not in that business at that time. He had that route. And he went to Astoria with my father. They got on a train, and my father had 2 satchels, and my grandfather had 2 satchels, and they went on the train to Astoria. And my father would stay on the station on this side of the turnstile while my grandfather would do the business of the 2 satchels. He would come back and take the 2 satchels from my father, and then he would do it again. So I said, "Dad, why didn't you go with Poppy? Why did he have to come on back?" And my father said, "The saving of the subway fare, which was 5 cents, was the profit of the day." So it's just, hearing some of these stories, and it's not a unique experience. This is of Gold's and my grandparents. I'm sure there were many, many people that are doing whatever they can to survive. And
By the way, were they selling white back then?
Initially, it was white horseradish, and that was the first, and then they started adding beets, which is really interesting because my first job as a Gold, and I was there from 1970 to 2015, but actually I was a baby. I grew into it as I was born. I remember my father coming home at these late hours, and when the garage door would close, Daddy's home. But my first job at Gold's, I must have been 5. So we're going back to do some math. I can't do that math because I don't believe it when I think of the years. But my father gave me a red marker. And Ruben, you're talking about red horseradish. When we started making red horseradish, I would take the marker and the boxes, I would put a red line across the box. that would differentiate between a case of white and a case of red. And that was my very first job at Gold's when I was a real little guy. And we eventually, after the bicycles, my father with the bicycles in the subway, then they got a step van, and we moved
And
on.
this was all selling to retail?
This is selling to stores, only stores.
Grocery stores,
Yes.
I guess, back then.
This is a picture of my grandmother in the backyard of 832 Coney Island Avenue, and letting the air come in. As some of you may know from grinding horseradish, fumes pretty potent. And if you look at that picture, you'll see that that's not clothes hanging on the clothesline. What do you think that is?
Oh, that's horseradish.
It's horseradish. The horseradish was drying. That's after it was washed. They had a big tub and they'd wash the horseradish. And before they would grind it, they would clean it, and that's how it dried. And this is my grandmother at that spot, Coney Island Avenue. And we eventually continued, got a step van, and sold through a step van. Before the step van, my father told me this story. They got an old taxi cab, and they took off the top of the cab, and they threw the horseradish, finished bottles of horseradish, and that's how they would make the deliveries and do the selling. It's really, when you hear some of these stories, advertising was always an important thing. My father talked to me about advertising constantly. Even when going later years, advertising, talk about Gold's, I'm not advertising now because it's not my company. This is Times Square. And if you look at the pictures on this ad, you'll see, what do you see? You see Gold's on top with the horseradish and the borscht. If you look at the bottom, what do you see?
The birds is coming.
And what does that mean?
The Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Right. It was the follow-up to Psycho. It was so you can pick this is 1960. I know exactly when that was. That was the time frame between Psycho and the birds, if I'm correct with that. So we're on the same level as Alfred Hitchcock. You see what advertising can do? It's all in the perception. So and look, who else do you see on this?
Fleischmann.
You see Fleischmann, Scotch, okay. Booze is fine, right? This is not prohibition. But what's on that other?
Oh, the TV.
And who was on the TV?
Jackie Gleason.
Jackie Gleason. So we're on Times Square. Gold's is on a par with Fleischmann's Scotch, or what I think it was Scotch, Alfred Hitchcock, and Jackie Gleason. So it's like mind-boggling when you think of how important advertising, which leads us into the next subject when we talk later about baseball, how we got involved with the Mets and the advertising, and we were the mustard of the Mets. Well, you know those little things that you have to like rip open with the pliers to put the mustard.
Yeah, you got to be
So everybody we were the exclusive mustard at the ballpark then, and whoever got a hot dog with mustard, it was an ad. It was an ad. It wasn't the profit from the mustard because of the loss. You're not making any money on a packet of mustard with 9 grams of mustard in it. You're not making, but they see Gold's, 50,000 people. This was in Shea. City Field was a lot less, which is
But tell me, going back, to your grandparents, at what point did they stop making the horseradish in the apartment and look for something bigger?
My father told me about distributors. There was one of the first distributors was a Breakstone distributor. Breakstone wanted to carry our horseradish, and they would deliver it to the stores with people who ever ordered, I guess, butter or whatever dairy products. We had a bunch of small distributors, store-door distributors, that would pick up on the horseradish. That was one of the first was Breakstone. Then we got into a company called Pure Dairy. Pure Dairy was a huge distributor that went into supermarket chains. I'm jumping way ahead. Once we got the distributors to go into the chains, then it led to getting into the warehouses of the chains. Because when you would sell to a distributor, they had to make their 30% markup, and then they would put it into the store, they have to make that 30%. But if we would sell it directly to the Walbaum's warehouse, or the ShopRite warehouse, or you're saving that middleman, you're saving that little markup. Sure, there was work involved for the store, for the Walbaum supermarket to pack the stuff out. You had to pack it out, and there was expense in having it in the warehouse. So there would be a reduction in price because it was selling now in large volume. But I'm jumping way ahead to how we got into the supermarket chains, which was first with Pure Dairy, was the distributor that went into a lot of the supermarkets. And back then, the supermarkets, some of us remember that. I don't know if you guys can remember these supermarkets, but there was Date Shopwell and, of course, Wallbounds.
Acme and
there was-
Bohack. and-
AUP,
Right,
Bohack.
right. Hills.
Food Fair,
Food Fair.
Farm.
Interesting story. David, you mentioned Food Fair.
I know the
Yeah.
guy.
Who'd you know? What was the guy's name? Do you remember?
Thank you.
Well,
I'll tell you in a
my
second.
contact was Ralph Dolan at Food Fair.
Yeah, okay.
And when we started with Food Fair, we were in all the warehouses. We were in ShopRite, Pathmark, Wallbounds, but not in Food Fair / Pantry Pride. We were not in that warehouse. So we had authorization to sell it to the stores in the New York division. Food Fair Pantry Pride also had many stores in New Jersey, and it had some stores in Connecticut, I think Connecticut, but New Jersey was where they were very big. We were able to sell it to the stores in the New York metro area, store by store. So we would have, now we're already into selling warehouses, but the only way we could sell Food Fair was to deliver 5 or 6 cases to a store. So we would get a distribution from Lou Goldberg. He was a dairy supervisor in the New York metro area. He would give us a distribution, and we would deliver it to the stores, and which was an ordeal. To have a truck go to 6 stores out, we would do it in a station wagon a lot of times, or the trucks. If you had to do it, you had to do it. So now I moved to Staten Island. There's so much stuff. I'm jumping to 1973 now.
Yeah, well, hold it.
Okay.
Let's go back a second, because I had asked about, your grandmother and the business starting in the apartment. Eventually, it got too big.
Right, right.
Right. So where did they go from the
Well, we had the
apartment?
distributors
Right.
owned the house, so now they lived there.
Right.
So they lived there. They actually went from 832 Coney Island Avenue. They moved to 4127 18th Avenue.
And they were still making
This is
horseradish
where
out of
they-
their
they were-
house,
they
or
were- no? Now we had turned it into a factory. At 4127, my father, after World War II, was able to get machinery because of the GI Bill. He was able to get certain machinery at a lower price. He was able to get a grinder. As a matter of fact, my grandmother said, when my father and his 2 brothers said, "We have a grinder." Now we bought a grinder, whatever, they spent $200. And my grandmother said, "Why do you need a grinder? I'm a grinder. Why do you need a filler? I'm a filler." So, and she meant it. She meant it. She was so used. My grandmother came to work until almost literally the day she passed away in 1975.
Wow.
We were at 4127 18th Avenue. We expanded to the building next door, which was 4129 18th Avenue, and we built a factory. And Ruben, you asked a good question, because that's the factory that you're looking right now at 4127 18th Avenue. And if you look at that, I need a point to really to point out what's going on here. But if you look all the ways to the right, you'll see a hopper. That's where the horseradish hopper was. That's that you can see that stainless steel hopper. That's where the horseradish would get pumped in from another side of the building. After it was ground, would get pumped into the hopper, and it would be filled. On the right side, you would see the empty. You could see empty jars on the right, and then it gets
Right,
white.
correct, yeah.
It gets filled, and that's a 4-spout filling machine, a 2-spout filling machine, which a 2-spout with 2 jars at a time would fill it. It would the plat would pop up the jars, and the horseradish would get filled, and then it would move around to that. Right in the center of the picture, you see the capper, that round circular. That's the capper, and next to it is a capper hopper. That's that rectangular or square-shaped thing on top where caps would be dumped in there. So if you were filling, and as the years went by, I would come by with my brother and my cousins, and we would help out if someone didn't show up, Passover or Rosh Hashanah, or even Christmas, New Year's, and we were off. We didn't have holidays. We didn't go watch the Mets or whatever it was. We had to go in. My father would call up and say, my cousins lived on 105th Street. We lived on 103rd Street in Canarsie. And they'd walk over to me, pick us up. We'd walk down to the Rockaway Parkway bus. We'd take it to the Foster Avenue bus, to 18th Avenue, to McDonald Avenue, and we were there. So one of us would be on one side of the machinery, putting the bottles on the empty bottles at the beginning of the machine, and then another person would be on the back end, on the other side, all the ways to the left of that picture, which you don't really see, but there's a labeler there. And that's where where it would be labeled, and that person would take the jars out and take the finished jars and put it in a box. So I don't know what your question was, Ruben. Did you ask me a question? I don't remember.
there was a question there, but we'll get back to it.
You talk. I think you mentioned you wanted to discuss the origins of us, how we got involved. That is the 3rd generation.
Right. Well, that was you were leading the, right, you were leading,
We
That's
we
where I was
were
going.
we were so bonded. We were so close. We were little guys. We were teeny guys, and we go to the Seder's at my grandparents' house on 18th Avenue, and we'd play under the tables, and we'd do all the things
You're
that little
talking about the
guys do.
brothers and the
This
cousins.
This is the cousins, the 4 cousins. They were in the business. It was myself, my brother, Steve, and my cousins Neil and Howard.
there was never any question that all of you were going into the business?
It gradually happened as we got into it. My brother Jason became a bankruptcy lawyer in D.C. The 4 of us did go into the business.
Can I ask you this? It's an ignorant question for me because what's the vegetable that they use for horseradish? What is it? Cabbage?
It's horseradish, man. It's a horseradish
It's a
root.
horseradish
It grows in the
root.
ground. So I have to go back to these pictures.
It's a root vegetable.
Okay.
There's a good one of me holding some
Well, I
roots.
pleaded ignorance and I
You know,
deserve it.
it looks like it's similar to ginger
Okay.
Yeah. It grows like a carrot.
or
in
like
the
a
ground.
parsnip,
Oh,
right?
okay, yeah.
Parsnip's tasteless, but it's
But it's the same
horseradishes.
look.
Yeah,
It looks similar.
You dig it out after the frost, and that's the time to do it. Which brings up time when we had there was a shortage of horseradish and a drought. But this is so. Getting back to this machinery, so one of us would be.
Mark, was this in the basement of your house, or
No, this is not my house. This is my grandparents' house.
But was it in the basement?
It was
or-
no. It was the basement is where they stored the glass, and there was storage where they stored the labels and they stored the caps. As a matter of fact, there's a great picture. I think I have it coming up, which shows 18th Avenue, with a vinegar truck making a delivery, and a glass truck making a delivery, and a horseradish from the farm. I have to see if I have that picture here. There's just so many pictures that.
But did they live there too? And have
Yes,
this?
yes, they lived. Upstairs was the apartment. It was two flights, one flight up, and then on the factory level, this were the storefronts that they expanded into the backyard, and that's where the horseradish was ground. So in the production line, the one of us would stand on one end feeding the glass, and the other take it off. The one that was feeding the glass, he also had to watch the caps. I pointed out where that cap hopper is, and he had to know when that caps were empty because he had to be smart. We need new caps, and he would peer in and see. Actually, there was a box of caps that went onto that hopper, and he would tap to see if it was getting empty. And if he should run out of caps, then you're going to get jars coming by with no caps on it.
Right.
And by the time it got to the other person at the front end who was taking you can't put. So you yell, hold it up, and that was the worst words you could use. It's like if we said to Mike, hold it up, then it's terrible, right? Because you have to stop everything.
You know, Mark, before I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'd like to get into the sports connection in a couple of minutes. But before we do that, I just want to ask you one question. What do you attribute Gold's surviving several generations? Now, I know that the current generation obviously isn't involved, but the fact that it went from your grandparents to your parents to you, your brothers, and your cousins.
Well, I described how my father and my uncles were involved when the company started. They were little guys, 13, 14. They wound up helping out by delivering on the bikes. And when after the war, when they got the equipment, and they were just together. This is my father and his 2 brothers. As my grandparents, my grandfather died in 1952, my grandmother until 1975. And they just worked. All they did was work. They didn't have electricians, they didn't have mechanics, they did everything themselves. My father and my uncles did everything themselves. They did all the selling themselves. Of course, we had truck drivers later on that did the delivering, and as we expanded, we had workers that were in the place and it went through that generation, and it came to my generation. And I told you a little bit about my story. And my cousin Howie wanted to go into the business after college. He went right into the business. And my cousin Neil went into the business. He was an actuary, and then he went in, went out a couple of times. And my cousin Steve, my brother Steve, always wanted to be in the business. He went to Pratt University, and he was mechanically knew his stuff, and he was an artist. My brother Steve was an artist. That's why he went into the business.
You know, can I just jump in here?
Okay, one.
We have to kind of wrap it up soon, but is there anything more, any questions you have, anything more?
Well, what I'd like to do is we're going to stop for a break, and then when we come back, we're going to discuss the sports part of the business. All right,
fine.
so for all of you out there, we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Hold tight.
Hi, my name is Michael. If you are over a certain age or retired and your wife or significant other keeps telling you you're spending too much time checking your fingernails, then maybe it's time to consider giving back to your community. Give some of your time. It could be an hour a week or an hour a day. It doesn't take much to spread some goodwill, put a smile on a stranger's face, and in the process, feel good about yourself. You can start by getting in touch with your local church or synagogue and asking how you can volunteer. Maybe your local food pantry or clothing charity. You can even check on your neighbors. You know, the ones you haven't talked to in a generation. Find out if they need any help. Maybe they need some assistance with grocery shopping or putting away clothes. You might even consider teaching a useful skill, like playing a musical instrument or tutoring young kids. So think about it. By now your nails should be pretty clean. Thank you.
Well, listen, we learned a lot about horseradish, and it's still delicious. It really is, especially Passover, which is coming up. But we're also going to learn a little bit more about the New York Mets. I personally, and I know you are too, I am a Met nut fanatic. And I can remember in 1962 when it all started, I was so thrilled. I think I was telling you before the program that the Giants and Dodgers were gone, and we had to live with the Yankees. And all of a sudden, the Met thing started. And I remember listening to the first exhibition game in 1962 from Florida, and listening to it in the car. We were visiting a relative, and that's when the bug started. I became, when I say I missed a lot of my, I went out a lot. I was a teenage kid, went out on dates and everything, but there were some things I purposely missed because it was an important Met game. It was part of my life.
Matter of fact, you know, he was late to a couple of dates because of some of the Met games. I don't know if you know that, right?
Well, maybe I was.
But how did Golds get involved
Right.
with the Mets?
So this is what you're looking at now is myself. I'm on the left. That's my cousin Howie, my cousin Neil, and my brother Steve. That's the four of us when we had moved to Hempstead. We moved to Hempstead in '94. Beginning of '94 is when we officially opened in Hempstead. And at that time, we had just purchased a mustard company just before we moved to Hempstead, which is sort of leads into your question of how we got involved with baseball. And they talk about the insanity of 1962. Because we're brothers when it comes to that. Because what I did, what you're looking at now is
Look at that.
I had sent away in December, if you can close, you'll see the postmark, December of 1961. How old were we in 1961? No one was born. Reuben wasn't even born yet. But in 1961, I sent away for a season ticket application. Now,
Good for you.
what yutz, and he was 14 years old or 12 years old, whoever old, sends away for a season ticket app. But I did, and that's the envelope that it came in.
Very good.
And I still have it. I still have it. These things don't survive time. This happened to survive time. And I was so screwy that I started a fan club.
Oh, my gosh.
And Stan Fischler, the hockey maven, he was working for the Journal American back then, and he publicized, did a story on me, and he said, why should anyone be a Mets fan? It's so much easier rooting for the Yanks. David, to your point, we were in the twilight zone between 1957 and 1962. 57 was the last year of Brooklyn Dodgers.
No
and
National League
62
team.
was,
We have not even the
National League
Giants,
team.
right? No National
And-
League team.
And you couldn't root for the Yankees.
No.
Unless you rooted for them to lose. Right?
Right.
So, I was one of those, and you can't be brought up as a kid rooting for a team to lose. It's terrible.
I lost a few friends because of that.
Yeah, it's terrible to have to. So I started this. I attempted to start this fan club. So we started the fan club. I got a lot of publicity from Stan Fischler. Did the story, and I put out a publication, the Met Maze, I called it. And if you look at the top, it says 5 years and then the flag. And this is 1963. What's 1963 and 5 plus 5?
68.
But I said 5 years and then the flag. So it's 5 years plus and then the flag. What happened in 1969?
They won the World
They
Series.
won the pennant, the flag.
Everyone. Shocked everyone.
What a this particular story says the new stadium won't be ready. The Shea Stadium they're talking about now because we started in the Polo Grounds. When
Right,
Dave and I went to our first games, it was the Polo Grounds. And I think you said your father was a Giant fan,
He was
baseball Giant fan.
and we would go to the Polo Grounds.
So you knew the Polo
Before
Grounds.
then, oh.
I didn't. I didn't until the Mets.
That's a whole nother show. But
That's right, the Brooklyn Dodgers and those years.
So when did they start selling horseradish at Shea Stadium?
So we didn't. Why would you buy horseradish at Shea Stadium? Why would you buy horse? Now, what do you buy? What do you buy at horseradish at Shea Stadium? What do you buy at
Hot
Shea
dogs.
Stadium?
Hot
And
dog.
what goes with hot dogs?
Mustard.
Mustard.
And we had just bought the mustard company,
Okay,
so it was a natural. There was so this is some early stuff with the Met program. I want to talking about the Mets first. April
ahead.
23rd, 1962. Do you know April 23rd, 1962? What happened?
First game, right?
No, it was they lost their first 9 games, the Mets.
And then they won in
Then they
St. Louis.
won in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Jay Hook. Here's the interesting
Jay
thing about
Hook,
here's the interesting thing about that date. That winter, my parents went to Florida to visit my grandparents. And we were at a minor league game. It was the minor league Miami Marlins, a Class D game. And we were in the ballpark. And they made an announcement during that game that the Mets won their first game. So I knew April 23rd, because that's when they won their first game. So I knew I was at that ballpark on April 23rd. I saw an unassisted triple play.
Oh my gosh.
Ernesto de la Oza of the Miami Marlins, the shortstop.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's just about the rarest thing, an unassisted triple play.
Very rare.
So, but at time, and I kept the scorecard, said TP6, meaning triple play by the shortstop. I saved it for years, but what does time do to some of this stuff? Leaves. And now it's in my memory, the triple play, but I don't have hard copy. I knew the date, but maybe it was a double play. Maybe it was something else. I was just a kid. Maybe I made a mistake. Internet open. My cousin Neil was a master of the internet. He was able to locate April 23rd, 1962, an article on the Fort Lauderdale Sun, which had Ernesto de la Oza did a triple play. So it was proof. I proved in my head it really happened. I really saw an unassisted triple play. This is Hobie Landreth. Do you remember Hobie Landreth? There was David and I would talk.
That's the first Met that they picked.
And why was he what did Casey Stengel say
Casey
about?
said, if you don't have a catcher, the balls will go all over.
A lot of pass balls.
A lot of pass
That's a great line by Casey Stengel. Hobie Landreth was a very bad hitter. He had one great hit.
Absolutely bad.
There was a double play, and it was May 12th, 1962. A doubleheader. Did I say double play? Doubleheader,
Doubleheader.
May 12th, 1962. We were talking about doubleheaders and how Bob Murphy would say, come back, do it.
Who
Do
knows
Bob
from
Murphy
whom?
said, come back.
Oh, come back for the second game.
Right.
It'll be free.
And who knows from double headers anymore?
No doubleheaders now. Hobie Landreth comes up. The Mets are losing by a run in the bottom of the 9th inning, and the pitcher is Warren Spahn.
Oh, yeah.
Warren Spahn was one of the greatest pitchers, left-handed pitchers
Left-handed
of all time.
pitcher.
And Hobie Landreth hits a home run, a game-winning home run. Man was on base, turns the loss into a win. And there was a great picture in the Daily News of Spahn walking off the mound while Landreth is rounding third.
Yes,
And I think that's where walk-off home run came from. In my head, that's where, because it was called game-ending home run.
Right.
As a kid, it was a game-ending home run, right? It wasn't called a walk-off home run. They came up with this stupid lingo, a lot of the lingo I don't like now, walk-off home run. Second game, Gil Hodges comes up, bottom of the 9th inning. Tie score, home run. Mets win the doubleheader. Wow. They won 40 games all year.
I know.
Is that 5% of all their wins came that day? It's 5% of 40? I don't know. That was one of the great doubleheaders.
And they brought the fans. The fans would come no matter how bad they were. They came to be part of this.
Hey, Mark, by the way, before I forget,
Oh,
we
yeah.
have these little They're not toys
you don't
anymore.
want to
These
hear
are
about Frank Thomas.
These are collector's
You don't want to
items.
hear about Mark
We'll get-
Thornberry.
But I want to get into the bobbleheads, the bobblehead dolls. What's the connection with the
Well,
Golds and the bobblehead dolls?
Let's see if I can get to the bobbleheads. This is what I was talking about, the packets where... This is Mike Piazza was our first bobblehead.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
In 2001 was our first promotion with the Mets. It was a bat bag day, a Little League bat bag day. We gave out Little League bat bags to the first, I think, 20,000 people that showed up at the ballpark. And I thought it'd be great with everyone be running around with, say, Golds on one side and say the Mets on the other side of the bat bag. I thought it was such a great idea. Now, but it's expensive doing these promotional deals. So, and we had the mustard color. I was convinced it was great press to have the great publicity to give out these give-outs, and we would exclusive mustard at Shea Stadium, 40, 50,000 people. Even if it was 20,000 people, everyone had hot dogs. So you had the demos.
That's right.
It was like a demo of all these people. So we did the promotion, but it was expensive. And now there were 4 of us, and we had to vote. We didn't vote it very little, but this was an expense. The first year, I got away with it, with the bat bag. Now we want to do another promotion and to a bobblehead doll, and it went up exponentially. The deal included that they would be exclusive, our stuff would be, and it's mustard, it's not horseradish, it's not duck sauce, which are other items. The mustard is the item that everyone uses. My cousin said, so we had a vote. So I said yes. My brother said no. My other cousin said, I don't care what you do. And the other cousin said, if you can get a Mike Piazza bobblehead, you have my vote. So I got in touch with Paul Danforth, who is the head guy at the Mets involved with this sort of stuff. And I said, Mike, can we get a Piazza bobblehead? This 2002. And he said, I don't know. He comes back. And I remember I was at a Key Food buying office when I got a call and I saved the call on my voicemail for years, but that disappeared, where Paul Danforth, the Mets guy, said, this is Mike Piazza. It wasn't, it was Paul. And he said, I've decided to do your bobblehead. Okay, so now I got Howie's vote. We did the bobblehead. That was the first of the bobblehead. So we were doing business, the bobbleheads, and we also did ads in the program. And if you look at the one on the left, it's where I picked out the best Mets of each year from 1962 to whatever. It was my choice, and I would pick them out. I had such a great time doing it, and I pictured people at the ballpark getting mustard all over this, while they're eating that mustard. It says Golds, and they're reading this
Very
thing.
good promotion.
I thought it was a great idea.
So how many years did Golds promote bobblehead dolls?
We did bobbleheads. We did 15 years of promotion.
15? You didn't have to vote every year, did you?
No, I managed to get 3-year deals this way. I didn't have to argue. 2 years I didn't have to argue. It's like, I managed to get around it, which was a tribute to my something or other that I was able to do it. But I was convinced it was positive. It wasn't just indulging my baseball stuff, whatever my baseball stuff was. And we actually switched to that ad on the right because my brother said, come on now. Look at all those words. Put some horseradish in the ad. So we switched that. I made a compromise with that. One interesting story with the bobblehead. Before we get into the curse of the bobblehead, if we have time, the curse of the parking spot's a good one. In 2013, Dwight Gooden was a choice for the bobblehead, and we also had the choice to pick someone to throw out the first pitch on the day of the promotion. So Dwight Gooden, we picked a kid from Staten Island. It was after Hurricane Sandy.
Wow.
And it was a kid that had tragedies in his family. We managed to cut this kid who was throwing out the first pitch. And the kid sat in the dugout, and Dwight Gooden sat there with the kid. It must have been 15 minutes before, just talking to the kid, just talking and talking and talking.
Terrific.
And then the kid throws out the first pitch. It was wonderful. Okay. So now, part of the deal was, there was that, you see where it says sharp, next to where it says Gold horseradish? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Part of the deal was, that's the camera well at the ballpark.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be, that sign was supposed to be there for that game. That was part of this expensive deal. So I look out, the game starts, and I'm with Catherine Marquette, who was the Met rep at the time, was with us in the suite. They gave us a suite on the day of the game. Mm. So I say, Catherine, I don't see, the thing wasn't there. The sign wasn't there. I said, and it's like a deal breaker, right? Where's the sign? So she starts texting away, trying to find out where the sign was. And then I said, you know what? This is that fine line between fan and businessman. I had a legitimate gripe there. But I said, if you can get Dwight Gooden to come into the suite, and we had buyers, the buyers from ShopRite, the buyers from Stop and Shop, and Walbans, we were all there for that, it's a great thing to come to these things. I said, if you can get Dwight Gooden to come into the suite, all is forgiven. So I don't know if my partners agreed with that. I took it into my own to make that deal with her. And she starts texting and she says, he'll be up in 10 minutes. Dwight Gooden comes into the suite and talks to everybody. Lets everyone takes pictures of him. He signs I don't have the Doc bobblehead here, but he signs the boxes, he signs the dolls they took. It was just a great episode with Dwight Gooden. He's such a good person. Yeah. It's such a tragedy what happened to his career, because he probably, I think they talk about, we want to talk about Soto, and you don't know when a career ends. You don't know what's going to end.
You're right about
when I think about that, I think of Andrew Jones. Do you remember? We'll talk about that later. Ruben, you were going to say something.
Yeah, we're gonna have to end it now, Mark. You're gonna have to promise us that you're gonna come back and we're gonna continue this.
Sure.
Because you're a wealth of information, and it brings back a lot of memories to all of us, even though I wasn't born then. Well, I have to say, as for myself, that was probably one of the most fascinating stories that I have ever heard about family, about legacy, and as I said earlier, about sports. Now, Mark, I know that after sitting through the interview, you thought that there were a couple of things that you should have gone into a little bit deeper. So why don't we start with the story of the curse of the stolen parking space? I know you whispered that into my ear.
Well, it's really, it could have been a terrible situation. But back in the day, I had to go to stores and make sure all the stores had enough horseradish prior to Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all the holidays. And there was one Passover, and I wanted to get to one store in particular that was near our plant on McDonald Avenue in Brooklyn. We were in Brooklyn at that time. And I wanted to get to the store on 18th Avenue, which was right around the corner. So I'm dashing back, and there's the store on 18th Avenue, and I want to get into that store, and there's no parking. It's on-street parking. There was no parking lot. And suddenly I saw a space right in front of the store. And I said, wow, that's beautiful. And a woman was backing into the spot. She was backing in. I said, I have to front into that spot. I had to front in. Terrible thing. So I fronted into that spot, and I took the spot, and she got out of her car, and she looked at me, and I said, no, I'll be right out. I just want to go into the store, and I'll be right out. I'm a salesman. I'll be right out. And she said, anytime you have a fight with your wife, you'll think of me. The curse of the stolen parking space. Fortunately, I've had very limited disputes with my wife, so it worked out fine.
Well, that's great. But I know our audience is probably wondering, what are we doing with all these bobbleheads over here?
Well, then there's the curse of the bobblehead. The curse of the bobblehead. So Gold's sponsored a promotional day with the Mets for 15 consecutive years. The first year we did a Little League bat bag. I thought it was a great idea to have a Little League bat bag that was given out to the first 12,000 fans that had kids that were 12 and under.
That is a great idea.
I figured everybody who would have a bat bag, that kids would the Little League, all the kids would see it, would say Mets on one side, it would say Gold's horseradish on the other side. It was a great plug. It would be kids all over the place. Would be
kids. I have to tell you, when I go to an event and they're giving out free T-shirts, I make sure to get one of the T-shirts.
Good idea. That's really what our thought was, that people would show that kids would show that bag. And I thought it was a great idea. Whether it was a great idea or not, I don't know, because it was 12,000 and the people that were the first 12,000 kids, and what age, and are you more than 9, are you years old, are you less than 9 years old? That was our first promotion. So now, we didn't want to do that again. And these things were expensive. It wasn't that it was a big deal to have a promotional day with the Mets.
This is going back to what years?
This is 2000. This is the first one, was the Little League bat bag in
25
2000.
years ago, yeah.
A lot of, it was very expensive to do that stuff. And my partners, there were four of us, is myself, my brother Steve, and my cousins Neil and Howie. We voted on most of these things. I was the craziest Met fan, so they didn't really like my idea of doing stuff with the Mets. But there were four of us, and we had to vote on some of this stuff. So now after the first one with the Little League bat bag, and we saw what the cost was and how it gained, the gains were, the gains in sales, and my brother, he said, I don't want to do it again. No more of these promotions. Expensive promotions. You know, it wasn't free. It was an expensive promotion. He didn't want to do it. And my cousin Neil, he said, I don't care what you do. You know, it's okay. So you had one vote. My vote was, of course, to do it a second year. And my brother said his vote was no. And my cousin Neil, he said, I don't care what you do. So it was now up to my cousin Howie. So now I have to pander to Howie. I have to get him to go along with doing it a second year, a promotion. He said to me, if we can get Mike Piazza to do a bobblehead doll, I'm in for it. So I checked with my guy at the Mets, Paul Danforth, who was the vice president in charge of whatever
Marketing
it was that we
or-
do, marketing exactly. And he said, let me check with Piazza. And I remember I was at Key Food Buying Office, and I got a call that Paul Danforth was on the phone. And Danforth got on, picked up the phone. He said, Mark, this is Mike Piazza. This is what Paul said. He said, I'm Mike Piazza, but I knew it was Paul. And he said, we decided to do your bobblehead promotion. I said, great, okay. So now, when I told Howie, now we had two votes. It was
You had a little
2-1
leverage
and
at
one.
that
I had
point, right?
leverage. It was clinched. It was a done deal. So we did the Piazza bobblehead, and hence the curse of the bobblehead started. Piazza hit 33 home runs the previous year. 2 years later, he hit 11 home runs, and his career was suddenly
after the bobblehead
after the
promotion.
bobblehead promotion, 11 home runs. Okay, we didn't really associate it with any sort of curse at the time, but he did 11 home runs. Our next choice, so now I smartened up. I said, I'm going to do a 2-year deal with the Mets. This way I don't have to argue with my partners twice every year. So I started extending it. And the next year I got the proper votes, and we decided to do a Kazmatsui bobblehead, Kazmatsui. So why was it we were going to do Kazmatsui? Paul Danforth told me that Kazmatsui is going to be the next Ozzie Smith. Now, Ozzie Smith, if you remember Ozzie Smith,
All-star.
he was not only an all-star, he'd do the flips around on shortstop. He was the greatest defensive shortstop in the major leagues at the time. And Kazmatsui was going to be the next Ozzie Smith. So he sold me on it, Kazmatsui. As some of you may know, and if you don't know, Kazmatsui never quite developed into a good ball player. He did hit a home run his first time up ever in the major leagues, but that was pretty much it. And interestingly, the Mets let us had a press conference with Kazmatsui that year. And I'm standing there like this, and Kazmatsui is behind me. And I'm talking and I'm saying, Kazmatsui is going to be the next Ozzie Smith, and we decided, right, he loves horseradish and wasabi. We're going to do a promotion with wasabi because it's Japanese. And I'm talking about all this stuff, and I'm here muttering behind me. So I finished my thing, and then I said, after it was done, I said to Jay Horwitz, who is the in charge of promotions and setting, he was the PR guy on the Mets. I said, Jay, why was there talking behind me? That's rude. And Jay told me that was the interpreter telling Matsui all my words, was saying my words.
So you didn't know Matsui, didn't you?
I didn't. I just heard babbling behind me, muttering behind me. I didn't know that he was explaining. Nonetheless, he was the bobblehead. It was great PR we got, but he was not wasn't a good ball player. 2 out of 2, Piazza, Matsui. Next year was going to be great. We picked John Franco. And Franco was one of the great relief pitchers of all time, and he was doing very well with the Mets. And he had the little C on his, if you remember, he was made captain of the team.
Sure.
And Franco, alas, his career was virtually done, and was no more.
This
the
after
curse.
the- after
after
you
the
promoted the
bobblehead.
bobblehead?
That year was a bad year. He wound up going to the Phillies, and he was never really good anymore.
So did the thought occur to you at that point, maybe we shouldn't do the bobblehead promotions?
It didn't really. It was only 3, and you go 0 for 3, you go 1 for 4. Your batting average goes from 0 to 250, and maybe you go 3 for 6. Suddenly you're 500. So I wasn't thinking of any curse then. And then after Matsui, subsequent bobbleheads included Pedro Martinez. Pedro Martinez was going to, we picked Martinez before the 06 season. And Pedro, if you remember, he did not play in the playoffs that year. This was the 2006 playoffs with Carlos Beltran, looked at the third strike, and that was the end of the game with the tying run on third base. The game that Andy Chavez made the great catch. If you remember, the great catch turned into a fantastic double play, and it was going to be a great Met win. Gooden gave up was it Gooden who gave up the home run? Whoever it was gave up a home run that tied it, and then Beltran looked at the third strike. Why did he look at the third strike? Why do you think he looked at the third strike?
He thought it was a ball.
No, it was because he was cursed. The Mets were
right.
cursed. That's why. It wasn't him. It was because Pedro Martinez, if you remember, he went into the dugout and he tripped going into the dugout.
Yes.
And when he tripped, he couldn't play in the playoffs at all. So he was that's what the curse was. Pedro, it went to Beltran looking at third strike, like transmitted from Martinez being cursed to Beltran looking at the third strike. Mets were out. So that was Pedro. Then we had a Jason Bay bobblehead. If you remember Jason Bay, he was very bad.
Probably don't remember him because it's the curse of the bobblehead.
He hit 30 home runs with Boston, over 30-something home runs with the Red Sox. Mets thought he'd be wonderful. We, my son and I, we had to pick who the bobblehead would be, and we picked Jason Bay, and Jason Bay was very bad.
Here he is, right
Jason
over
Bay's
here.
right over here. We did have one good selection, we thought, when we picked David Wright.
That would have been my pick.
But what happened to David Wright? He was slammed into Ike Davis. If you remember, there was a play where Davis was the first baseman, Wright was the third baseman. They were looking for a pop. They crashed into each other. And that's what I believe started David Wright under the spinal stenosis situation. And he was good for another few years. And he did come back in 2015 in the World Series, which was his last hurrah when he hit a home run in the World Series. Or the next year he may have hit the home run. But why did he smash into Ike Davis?
The bobblehead, curse of the bobblehead.
Right.
Doll.
Now, so we had David Wright's situation. Now, Paul LaDuca was a great, great catcher, I thought, and a clutch hitter on the 2006 team that made the playoffs. And we decided to make LaDuca the bobblehead. And why did we like him? I love the cute little catcher's mask. And I thought it was a great promotion. So we made LaDuca the bobblehead in 2007. Unfortunately, Paul LaDuca had gambling problems, had other issues, and other problems. Why did he have all those problems?
Curse of the bobblehead.
Then you get into the Johan Santana. He was a bobblehead. He was going to be great. And we picked Johan Santana. And
He
pitched
good.
his no-hitter. It's somewhat flawed, the no-hitter. If you remember the no-hitter, there was the ball that was fair, and the umpires called foul. So I don't consider it really a flawed no-hitter. Let's call it. Why was it a flawed no-hitter? Because he was the curse of the bobblehead. That's what cursed it. That's what made the umpire make a bad call on that. He had all these fascinating things were going on, and between Santana and you remember K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez. K-Rod. They got him before before the 2008 season? We decided, that's the guy. He's the greatest relief pitcher in the major leagues. And the Mets got him. We're going to make him the bobblehead. And then what happens to him? He gets into a fight with his father-in-law in the clubhouse. He punches out his father-in-law. Why did he punch out his father-in-law?
Curse of the bobblehead.
Curse of the bobblehead. He could have waited till he got out of the ballpark before he was going to punch his father. No, you shouldn't punch your father. You shouldn't punch anyone. So, but all these. And a story popped up in the Times. Ken Belson of the New York Times. He has a great book out now about the NFL. It's the name of it's not coming to me. But Belson did a story on the curse of the bobblehead. And it took off, and it was we got a lot of publicity out of that. The Mets wound up putting in their program a picture and a story about all the bobbleheads that we had been doing, which is great, great press. And we decided after the last bobblehead that was cursed, I think it was Bay. I think it was Bay or Ike Davis. We decided the answer to all of this is to pick someone as our bobblehead, a retired player, right? Does that make sense? Right? A retired player, they can't be cursed.
Well, right.
Probably not,
Right.
unless something, I don't know what, but can't be cursed. So we decided to make Keith Hernandez a bobblehead. And the next year, it was 2013, we decided to make Dwight Gooden a bobblehead. Dwight Gooden had retired 20 years earlier, whatever it was, but we decided to make him the bobblehead. Dwight Gooden was one of the great pitchers of all time. We decided to make him the bobblehead. So what's interesting about the Doc Gooden bobblehead is that was the time of Hurricane Sandy. What year was Sandy? Do you remember when Hurricane?
12, I think.
Was it 12? We made Doc the bobblehead in 13. So it was 13. And what we did was we had the opportunity to select someone to throw out the first pitch on the promotional day. So we picked a kid from Staten Island who lost a family member during Sandy. So, and the kid was a Little League kid, and we decided to give him the honor of throwing at the first pitch. He threw out the first pitch. Doc Gooden sat in the dugout with this kid and talked to him. It must have been for 15 minutes, just talking to this kid. They gave us a suite on the day of our promotion as part of the deal. Super expensive promotion, but they give us a suite that day where we could bring in the customers, the buyers from ShopRite, Stop and Shop, and whatever chains there were, we'd bring them all in there. And we saw him talking to the kid for all this time. It was really great. So now the game starts and we're up there watching. Part of the deal is there's supposed to be a sign in the camera well next to the dugout on first base and third base that said Gold's horseradish. I mean, what are you doing this for? We want to get the publicity. And I'm looking through and I don't see this sign. It's like the second inning, and I don't see this sign. And now Catherine Marquette was our rep at the time that from the Mets that was in the suite with us, making sure everything was smooth. And I said, where's the thing? Now, that's like a deal breaker. You pay this money, and you're supposed to get this for it, and we didn't get it. So I said, Catherine, I don't see it. And she's looking. Oh, damn. So she takes out her phone, and she's texting. And I said, Catherine, this is what we can do. If you can get Dwight Gooden to come into the suite to talk to all of the buyers that are here and to sign autographs, all is forgotten, all is well. There's a fine line between fan and businessman. This is like the fan part of me is in there. This is like a dollars and cents thing on one side, and it's, I'm a fan, and Dwight Gooden's going to come up here. Well, so she starts texting again, and she says, he'll be up in 10 minutes. Dwight Gooden comes into the suite. Wonderful person. Talks to everyone in there. He signs the boxes. He signs the bobblehead dolls that we had picked, and it was just great. So there was a good ending to the Curse of the Bobblehead.
Mark, thanks for those really terrific stories. I think you cleared up a couple of things that we missed during the initial interview. I want to thank you very much for coming back and letting us in on a little bit more of your family history and history of the Mets. So for all you Met fans out there, I think you got a very interesting education. And for all of our friends, stay tuned for our next get-together. I'm sure you're really going to enjoy it, just as we enjoyed this one with Marc Gold. Mark, again, thanks for being here.
Thank you. A lot of fun. Thanks.
The Get Together is brought to you in cooperation with the Older Adult Center Networks and the Center for Lifelong Development, with funding provided by the New York City Department of Aging and produced through the facilities of Community Media of Staten Island.